saints and African spirituality. What's that about? Well, before we get into that topic, I would just like to play a short audio of uh, my 85-year-old abuelita, my grandmother, speaking on her upbringing with the saints as a long-term espiritista, you know, ashiyo. When she was younger, she never used to get sick because the saints took care of her. They took care of her. So she never would get sick. Every night she would pray to the saints. Oh, wow. Yeah. And the saints would bless her and give her grace. As you heard in that short clip, that was a conversation between me, my abuela, and my little brother, which was actually part of a longer conversation, which abuela was kind of recanting experiences from her childhood, growing up in the practice of Espiritismo, things like that. Often too, what you find in the Latin community is the older sibling will often know Spanish, but the younger ones won't, because the older one grows up translating everything for the younger sibling. So that's what you often see. Now, to dive further into that scenario, let's get into the saints. And before we really dive deep, let's realize that my abuela is an elder. Abuela is 80 plus years old. And, she grew up in the practice. Both of her parents were practitioners of Espiritismo, and so were their parents, and so on and so forth. So, there is a lot of years of experience in my family lineage with Espiritismo, which in the last 100 years, you had sectors or practices added into that practice that we know as sanse, or Puerto Rican voodoo. So there's a long lineage of that in my line, as well as, because abuela is my mother's mother. Now, my mother also, through her father's lineage, which is my mother's father, his mother was a practitioner of Santeria, Lukumi, and she was a priestess in the tradition. And so, I had the blessing of having both of those traditions within my lineage to be able to bring them forth to you guys and speak in a way from a person that has, grown up around it, and then ended up walking into these traditions myself, with Orisha practice, walking into Ifa, and continuing on the Puerto Rican voodoo. So, with that being said, let's get into it, man, because this is a very controversial topic when we get into the saints, because a lot of people, especially with the Black Power movement coming into African spirituality, from whatever religion they were in, whether they were Islam or whether they were Christian or whatever the case is, and they come in here and often they see the saints and it sends a shockwave through them, because they're like, wow, this is African tradition. Why does it look like this? And so I can bring a lot of insight. So let's get into the Santos, the saints. Now, we have to understand that when slaves were brought over, you had the initial reason that most people know about, which is we had to hide the practices from the slave master. Okay, so let's talk about Orisha tradition before we open it up and apply it to other traditions. So within Orisha tradition, when you get an Orisha given to you from a Babalawo or a Santero, it is filled with things that they confection with, certain herbs, certain animal sacrifices will go towards it. Things like that happen to give birth to that pot. And it's done that way because also the lineage that it come from is significant, because these people have been doing this like this for thousands of years. And so when you're birthed an Orisha through a pot, that is coming from a very long line. And so, if you were caught praying to an Orisha in the vessel that we would have been used to doing that in, that was like a death sentence or a severe punishment that could take place from there. And so because of that, you see this taking place where we had to disguise it. And what we have to realize is that when you see the saint, like and this is why I tell y'all, if you did not receive that statue from a Baba or a Santero or somebody in a practice, you don't have that Orisha. It did not get confectioned. There's things that go into confectioning certain aspects even of that Orisha, like which one do you have? So it would look like this. You see a slave praying in front of Santa Barbara. When the slave master come in, the slave is praying to Santa Barbara. Okay, it's fine. But unbeknownst to that slave master, that Santa Barbara is filled with herbs and different things that went into it. That is actually Shango. So Shango is inside the Santa Barbara. This is why these statues are hollow. If you notice, most of these statues are hollowed inside. And there's a reason for that. Because when we're talking about Orisha specifically, there are things stuffed into it that confectioned that spirit. Remember, these people that came into the Caribbean were the priests. And so they were very skilled. They were like chemists. They were master alchemists. They knew how to do this. And often the saint that they picked to coincide with that Orisha shared either a similar story or they had similar characteristics. And so that's what we see amongst the practice. So understanding that, it goes deeper, because see, then when you get into aspects of voodoo, you're using the image of the saint to call the Orisha, to call the Loa through that image. So the Loa is coming through that image of that saint, of that santo, of that saint. There's things that we do to it to make these things happen. But there's a caveat that people are missing. The santo allowed this whole process to take place. The saint allows itself to be used in that way. And there's a reason for it. When these things were happening, and let's not forget, because there was a very important thing that happened in the Caribbean, in the Americas, where there was a merging of different cultures. So, along with, especially when we look at voodoo, the powers that come with that saint became infused with our African traditional Loa, with our African traditional spirits, as well as whatever Native American influence got put into it, right? And so we see this merging. And let's not forget that Europe conquered the world with Catholicism. Facts. You like it or not. The world got conquered with those saints. Period. That's what happened. So you had these people that came and found themselves in bondage and were able to take the strengths out of the European traditions and add them into our own. to create something very powerful and very aggressive, because voodoo gets very aggressive. See, when you get into spirits that come from voodoo pantheons, they are very aggressive how they move, very swift. You understand? And so, understanding this and knowing that this took place, it added a certain kick into the things that we were doing. Because now we taking the conquering this tradition, which was Catholicism, and now we done infused it with these African traditional practices. Ooh, it got very hot for the Europeans, and they had to get the fuck out of Haiti. Okay? So this is what we see starting to happen with the saints. Now, there was another thing that took place that I think a lot of people skip over. Okay? And I remember, one time talking to my mother, and my mom, who's from Puerto Rico, she has, of course, like most Puerto Ricans, mixed lineage, right? Where she got ancestors from Yoruba land, she got ancestors from Congo, but then she got ancestors from Portugal, she got ancestors from Spain. She got ancestors that are Taino, they've been on the island, right? This is all within the lineage, okay? And so, one day, we were talking, and, she was like, yeah, man, those Spaniards, man, yeah, they were some sick, sadistic motherfuckers. Like, they were terrible, but they're still a part of you. They're still in your blood, and it helps to make the blood strong. That's what my mom said. Now, when we really look at it, this leads to a deeper conversation, because as the Spaniards and the Portuguese were forcing themselves into our lineages, something started to happen. The Santos became just as much of ours as they were theirs. And this is the part where people miss. What happens when the child of the slave master and the slave is born? He has both parties. He has both lineages in him. Catholicism belongs to that child just as much as it belongs to that Spaniard. Ifa or Risha tradition belongs just as much to that child as it did to the African person that gave birth to him. Both of those traditions are in the child. And so now the saint have another extra reason to do for that child, because why? The blood is still theirs. That is still their child. And this is the part where a lot of people that's coming from pro-black ideology, they're not going to understand that. They just not, because they're rejecting everything that came with colonization. But in doing that, you're rejecting parts of yourself, because likely you had a mixing somewhere. Yes, you did. And that added to who you are. See, in these indigenous practices, all ancestors matter. They dead now. What can they do for you? Move them. I'm an occultist. Move them and make them do what you need them to do. And this is what we started to see with the Santos. These saints were no longer just the Europeans. They belonged to the mulatto as well. They belonged to the child that just had a small admixture amount. Just 5-10% of this of the Spaniard. That saint is yours too. That Catholicism is yours too. That power that they pulling out of that shit, that's yours too. Use it. This is what we start to see with the saints. And as I started to grow in understanding of these things, I started to open my eyes more to understanding the power of what our traditions became in the Western side of the world. When you're able to tap in to different aspects of your ancestry and blend them all together to create these traditions that we see here. 21 divisiones, Haitian Vodou, Puerto Rican sanse. It's all aspects of voodoo. Then you've seen it go into North America with New Orleans voodoo and hoodoo practices where you see saints venerated very often. You see the colliding of the church in Congo tradition, in these different practices. You see things like the Yoruba laying tricks in hoodoo, very similar to Yoruba. And I'm saying Yoruba and not Ifa because laying a trick is a Yoruba. Like if you go deeper, see, because there's more than one different spiritual practice that you can apply to Yoruba people. It's not just Ifa. That's just the popular one people know. But there's different type of mystics and everything in Yoruba culture, okay? And you start to see these things creeped into hoodoo. All of it belongs to us. It's in our lineage of those being born of Caribbean descent, Black American descent, South American descent, Central American descent, that have African ties. And this is why we're so feared. When you stop looking at things from a perspective that's black and white, and you start to look at the gray, you will start to see your power. You will start to see the things that make people afraid of your people. The power. There's power in the Santos. They showed it to us in the Haitian Revolution. And, you know, there were things that took place. Of course, different practitioners felt different ways. You have people like Dirty Bookman that said to rid ourselves of the pathetic images of the slave master. But a good chunk of those people, those images belong to them too now. Because the blood was stirred. The blood held things within it that now was the slave masters. So as you're navigating your journey, really think about the things I'm saying on your occult journey. I like to think of myself as an indigenous occultist, where I take different aspects of indigenous culture that belong to my lineage and not mix them, but find where they're useful in my life. You know, there's a place for Black American Hoodoo in my life. There's a place for Ifa. There's a place for sanse. I keep them separate, but they work together because they all play a part of me somewhere. This is why you don't see me jumping too far. You don't see me jump all the way to Hinduism. Let the East Indians have their Hinduism. I got a lineage that's powerful, that belongs to me. And everybody else that shares that lineage. I don't need to jump and become a Wiccan. You know, I don't need to jump and become whatever it is. I mean, when we get into Wiccan, technically, you know, I got European ancestors, but I don't feel the need to become a Wiccan. I have cultures within me that are strong, and so do you, so does everybody. You don't have to jump into all of these Buddhists and stuff like that. You have a culture that's powerful. Dig into it. Don't be afraid. You see a Santo, the Santos belong to you too, what you mix with. Most Black Americans have up to 17% European DNA. Santos belong to you. Most people in the Caribbean have significantly more than 17%, a lot of them. Santos belong to you. Orisha belong to you. Loa. These different spirits. And when they merged in the Caribbean, Chacho created something very potent. Very potent. We defeated the most powerful super nations at that time. Back to back to back to back. Get them out of here. Get them out of here. Get them out of here. Next, Lil Wayne, show me my opponent. Show me my opponent. See, some of y'all too young to remember that. But that's what took place. The Santos, they belong to all of us. And when you understand the science behind these saints, you will understand deeper into the mysteries, the misterios that we call the Loa. When you understand the story of Saint Lazaro, you will understand deeper the story of Papa Legba and what he can do. When you understand the story of Diosa de Mar, you understand deeper into La Sirene and what she can do. When you understand the secrets, the mysteries that come with Saint Martha, you can understand the mysteries that come with Filomena Lubana. This is big game I'm giving y'all. I'm feeling generous today. I'm feeling generous. You know what I mean? I'm feeling generous. And I hope that you guys can take this knowledge and make it applicable. I hope that you can break free from the categorization that they put you in to say you're this and you're that. Where really are you? Where did your lineage really come from? How were they getting it popping? Because all that is yours. How can you use it? How can you further your life with it? What does it mean? What secrets does it hold? What life lessons can it teach you? How does that apply to where you're at now in your life? So many questions that you can ask yourself. The Santos are examples of that. We took something that was imposed on us and forced into us. The saints, we used them at first to mask our practices. But then the Spaniard and the Portuguese inserted them into us by inserting themselves into our lineage. And what did they get back? That's what they got back. And we took our power. We took our freedom because we understood what that meant. We understood that you just inserted into us the same things that you used to conquer the world. The same spirits that you used to conquer everybody is ours now. What's popping? What's up? And we turned the guns. And we won. And the Santos allowed those things to happen. It was a group effort. Our spirits from Africa never forgot us. And they fueled us. They fueled us with the energy. They invigorated us to be able to take back vengeance and freedom. In the Santos, let it happen. They didn't protect those Europeans from us. Why? Because we were their children too. That's why. And so, with that being said, family, y'all continue y'all journeys. Y'all continue elevating and continue the enlightenment. Continue to evolve past what this society tries to box you into being. Because there's a reason they do that. They don't want you to know all your power. They don't want you to know all of your potential. All of the things that you have hidden inside of you that's dormant, that's waking up. Scary, spooky times, spooky times. And so, family, make sure you like and subscribe. Join the mentorship if you want to learn more in depth. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Aye, bobo.